What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Payne. Welcome back to another Final Fantasy VII Evercrisis video. Alright guys, this is a video I don't think I've ever done. I don't know why I haven't covered this, but first off, shout out to Meow database. If you don't know the database, I'll put it in the description below. They're fantastic. They're a little bit behind currently, but they do a lot of the explanations on very simple and complex mechanics. They do tier lists. They cover some of the best weapons for the characters. And Final Fantasy VII Evercrisis is one of the games they in fact have covered. Now I want to talk about this because they've done a fantastic job explaining everything about the damage mechanics. And I think this is important for those that care about the math behind the damage, because you can min-max better. And for those who don't care about the math, you'll at least understand the basics of how damage is calculated. It may help you improve your game a little bit. Now, I've known about this for quite some time. I've just never touched upon it, but I thought this was a good time, especially with all the brand new players coming in, and for those veterans who have never seen this before. Okay, so first off, let's go through the very simple thing. So Final Fantasy VII Evercrisis damage mechanics. This is going to be something that is going to be conducted through their testing, my testing. I've done the same testing, and this is absolutely accurate. So I can attest to this, and I know a lot of other players that have that do a lot of testing in the back end on my Discord have also done this, and we all agree that this is exactly how it works. So damage mechanics explained. Let's talk a little bit about this. Okay, so basic attack. The normal attack executed by a unit during attack stance, the damage appears to be 15.5% of the unit's total attack stat, multiplied by the attack stance multiplier, which is 1.25 or 1.5 or 1.65 in co-op. Now, if you don't know what this attack stance is, it is that red triangle on your screen. Once it hits the full amount, it's 1.5 in solo mode, it's 1.65 in co-op mode. Before it hits the full amount, it's 1.25 multiplied on your normal attack. Basic attack is always non-elemental. Keep that in mind. Different units use different base stats for their basic attack. Every unit except Aerith, basic attack is based off of 15.5% total P attack, which is physical attack. Aerith basic attack is based off of 15.5 total magic attack. Keep that in mind, okay? Stance multiplier. Now, I don't know if this is exactly 100% true. I think it is. I think this still does apply to Sephiroth as well. I was thinking maybe Sephiroth does M attack as well, but I think he also does P attack too. Stance multiplier. So this is what we were talking about earlier. The attack or defense stance used during battle. Okay, so again, that's the blue stance with the shield or the triangle stance with the red, okay? The attack stance starts off at 25% bonus damage. Keep that in mind. When you get it to full, the cap is at 50% on normal mode. It's at 65% in co-op mode. One thing to note in co-op mode is you all three of you have to be on the same stance for that 65% to kick in. The moment one of you switch the stance and the others do not, this does not apply anymore, okay? Bonus damage when the gauge is filled. This multiplier can be further increased actively by using the R abilities that boost the stance multiplier. We've talked about these in my last video in the advanced wish list. Example, P attack bonus from stance R ability in a solo battle will be calculated as 1.5, right? 1 plus 0.8 equals 2.7 times multiplier from attack stance. Insane. In co-op battles, it's even higher. So we'll talk more about the calculation very soon. Elemental, so remember that, okay? So the physical stance potency, for example, or the magic stance potency, or the ability stance potency, I forgot the full name of that R ability, but that's what they're referring to here. The more you increase that, the more damage your stance will do. If you can keep that stance at full, you're popping off with insane damage, okay? So remember that. That's why it's such an important thing to have that advanced wish list in place to boost your abilities even further for damage. All right, elemental weakness is at minimum a 100%, which is a 2 times multiplier to damage. The enemy must be innately weak to the element. That makes sense. Obviously, hitting somebody with weakness to thunder with a thunder weapon will do 100% more damage, which you can see in game. Some enemies may be even weaker, taking 150%, 2.5%, or even 200%, 3 times more damage. An elemental attack that hits an enemy off weakness provides no damage bonus. So meaning if you hit somebody with a thunder weapon that's weak to lightning, there's no damage bonus. It's just 1%, which is exactly what you see is what you get in terms of damage, okay? Elemental damage multipliers. Elemental potency is another multiplier to damage. Level 5 lightning potency boosts lightning damage by 55%. So for example, Cloud's Murasame Guard comes with a passive that boosts lightning damage by an additional 35%. The result is 55% plus 35% for 90% more lightning damage. Okay, so very important to note, this is why it's so crazy to have those garbs and mix in elemental potencies as our abilities to boost the damage of elemental weapons even further. All right, so skill multiplier and potency. All damaging skills have a percentage potency. An OB10 Murasame, for example, has 750% lightning damage potency. It is important to note that for AoE damage dealing weapons, the potency displayed on the weapon is the exact potency dealt to all enemies across the field. So a 500% AoE potency deals 500% to all enemies, whether they're single enemies, 2 enemies, 3 enemies, etc. Right? So it's 500 across the field no matter how many enemies. It doesn't split up in any way, shape, or form. Critical hit multiplier. Now this one is the tragic downfall. I think they need to increase this one. I've talked about it numerous times in other videos. Critical hit multiplier is a 50%, 1.5 times multiplier to damage. This multiplier can be increased multiplicatively, geez, I hate that word, by weapons with our abilities that boost the crit damage potency. Currently, only some non-elemental attacks can crit, and no elemental attacks can crit. That is very important to note. No elemental weapons can crit, and the way you identify what your crit percentage is simply looking at the weapon you have equipped. It's always 10%. So you have a 10% chance to do 1.5% multiplier to damage unless you add additional crit damage potency R abilities, which will increase that further. Right now, it's the worst stat in my opinion in the game because of the low percentage chance to actually even crit. So, just so you guys are aware of that. Defensive debuffs. There are 3 stages currently. We are all aware of this: low, mid, high. And then here, I believe this is damage multiplier and doesn't care about the enemy's defense. Just so you guys are aware, all enemies' defense is at 100. Unless it's special case where they're higher physical attack or higher magic defense, or physical defense, then it's at 300. But all enemies, doesn't matter what level they are, usually have 100 and 100 of both, just so you guys are aware of that, okay? So low equals 10%, mid equals 20%, and high equals 35% bonus damage. That's why it's so important to push the 3 arrows up, because you do a lot more damage, right? Defense. So this is part I don't personally test, but I'm going to share my findings. 45 extra defense, level 4 defense resulted. So this is just increase of your own defense. I honestly, it's so minuscule until you hit a certain point, and then it becomes really, really good. The problem is it's really hard to get to that point. You need a lot of material, you need a lot of other physical defense or magical defense. Our abilities to boost this, I haven't been testing this very much because really, at the end of the day, the king of this game is damage, right? So that's what most people will do. All right, so enemy mechanics explained. Enemy defense. Most enemies have the same physical defense and magic defense. We just talked about this. You'll do the same damage to a level 13 as you would to a 63. Absolutely, this is correct. Enemy elemental resistance. Enemies can resist certain elemental attacks. It appears to be 80% total damage reduction. That's huge, and he is right. It is 80%. Enemy level damage mitigation factor. So there is a hidden factor in the game where damage is higher or lower based on the level difference between your unit and the enemy. You deal higher damage when there is a less of a level gap between the two. If you're above the level of the enemy, there won't be any damage mitigation from this factor. And this is also very much a factual thing. When you fight a level 63 as a level 53 versus a level 60, there is actually a damage gap difference for sure. Also because your stats are increased, that kind of does help you as well too. Enemy self buffs. Enemies can increase their physical or magical defense. This rate of damage mitigation multiplier. 3 arrows on physical defense will reduce up to 50%. They can go all the way to 6 arrows. You guys know this already. Maybe it's 5, but something crazy. He doesn't have arrows here. So here's how the formula is calculated. This is very important, okay? So basic attack, so for elemental attacks, basic attack damage, either physical or magical, in this case it'll be physical because it's cloud, times your multiplier, so your stance multiplier, times the elemental weakness, times the skill multiplier, times the elemental damage multiplier, times buffs and debuffs. So here's a simple example that they give, and this is a great example, okay? So your cloud has 1,000 physical attack, P attack, and uses a 750 physical lightning skill. So let's just say the Murasame at OB10 on an enemy that is weak to lightning. You have 30% lightning potency boost from your R ability, or from I guess in this case it would be the, what the hell will give you, I guess he doesn't have the garb. He must just have 30% lightning because the garb is 35%. So let's theoretically say 30% lightning potency boost, and max stance boost is 50% bonus. So we know this is a solo fight, not a co-op fight. So this is how it's calculated. 0.155, we already talked about this up here, right? That's what the basic attack is, 0.155, okay? Times 1.5, which is what your stance is at, right? That's a full stance. That's 50% more damage. Times 2.0 weakness, right? Because the enemy is weak against lightning, times 7.5, which is what the multiplier here is for the actual physical lightning skill, times 1.3, which is the 30% lightning potency, times buffs and debuffs. Okay, so factoring here the buffs and debuffs, the only thing really here, actually there's nothing to factor in because there is no buffs and debuffs mentioned. So the total damage here would be 4,533 on the enemy times whatever the buffs and debuffs are. So let's just say you do physical defense down by 30%, right? So you go times 1.3. So that would add on to the 4,533, and that would be your total damage, okay? So for most non-elemental attacks, it's a little different. It goes, your cloud has 1,000 physical attack and uses a 900% non-elemental physical skill on an enemy. The attack crits though. You have a 5% crit damage potency. So remember, the normal crit amount is, I believe, where was that? Where's it? Crit. Sorry, guys, right here. 1.5, okay? We're adding an extra 5% to that. So here's how it's going to calculate with just a crit damage. 0.155 for your basic attack, times 1,000 physical attack, which is what you have as a stat, times 1.5, which is 50% for your stance at full, times 1.5, we already talked about this as crit, times 1.05, that extra 5% of crit potency, times 9, which is your 900 elemental skill, times buffs and debuffs. You can see here it's a lot less damage coming through when it's non-elemental, even with a crit. Now you can imagine, take the crit away, and this becomes even lower, right? Because that crit also is a pretty big multiplier, but still nowhere near as good as an elemental attack. This is why elemental weapons are king and queens of this game. They just do way more damage overall. So for limit breaks, basic attack damage, P attack plus M attack. Remember, even if it's a physical attack character, it does take into effect the magic attack. Now, obviously, even if your character is a more physical attack damage dealer, the stat stream, understanding where you want to push the limits will help your limit break do more damage as well as your summons. So keep that in mind. So essentially, his basic attack damage is physical attack plus magic attack divided by 2. Then plug this value into any elemental or non-elemental damage formula. So let's say 1.8%, right? Or if it's like a regular limit, or 2.2% if it's a summon, and then you get yourself your math there. So that's why it's kind of important to push both physical attack and magical attack. Now, for my cloud, for example, I don't have all the magic attack streams done because, quite honestly, it's not too much of a substantial difference, and I'm waiting to save all my currency for higher end levels like 65 now because we're getting it quicker, and I don't want to use my character shards, but my limits can definitely go up in damage once I decide to finally maximize those streams, right? So in conclusion, elemental damage is vastly superior if the enemy is weak to that element. Absolutely. When comparing two weapons of similar level and overboost, elemental damage weapons that target enemy weakness is vastly superior to non-elemental damage. That is an absolute fact, except keeping in mind that if you have the Zidane sword, for example, fully maxed out versus something that's 750%, that 1,300% is huge. So you can actually do a lot more damage with some non-elemental weapons, but there's only one case really in this that we're talking about, right? More attack or more elemental potency. For example, my first build has 1,000 physical attack with 40% elemental potency. My second build has 1,200 physical attack with 25% elemental potency. The second build is stronger for elemental potency and basic damage, right? So keep that in mind. As you can see here, the physical attack with 25% is worth more than the 1,000 physical attack with 40% elemental damage. So this is important to note. You can plug this into any damage formula that we showed you above, and you can understand what makes more sense to you. So remember, guys, when you are calculating your damage, if you want to do the best build, don't only look at the stats, but think about the actual R abilities that do matter. So take this formula and apply it to anything you want to build and see what makes more sense to you. All right, guys, this is Payne. Hope this video was helpful. Shout out to Meow Database again. Thank you for the author of this. Means a lot that they updated this on November 30th, 2023. This is Payne. I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Take care.